Here we go. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna read to my director's report, but I'm also gonna share the screen with you so you can follow along. As I mentioned, this represents my final report as president. I've been president since 2015. And in spite of COVID and Zoom meetings, this DS board has been very busy, and DS has really made a lot of progress during that time. Especially the board quickly pivoted to Zoom meetings, and instead of having 2 in-person meetings per year, we now have a 1-hour virtual board meeting remotely every month. So the board has just been probably busier than we ever have been. What I want to list here is what I feel are the major accomplishments of the board since I've been president. I mentioned here that a lot of my focus was on sustainable governance and financial stability, so we could get to where we are now, which is looking at technical redevelopment. And these are the accomplishments that I could think of. I'm especially trying to give credit to the board here, and again, to how busy and committed and dedicated this board has been in the 6 years that I've been president. During that time, we've achieved tax-exempt nonprofit 501c3 status. We've developed a MOU for our institutional participants that's posted on our website. If you don't know what that is, that's on the governance page. We have a very detailed governance page on the Digital Scriptorium website, where we also post the consortium bylaws, which were written under our, again, the term of this board with advice of legal counsel. We now have banking and investment accounts and an investment plan that was drawn up with the, again, with the Council of a Financial Advisor. We have a advisory chair that we've now made that position have an ex officio seat on the board, with the idea of having a more, developing a more active advisory council. That's still a work in progress. We have applied the weighted fee schedule that was developed by the under the previous board, but developed by myself, that we use to assign membership fees according to a sliding scale and ability of institutions to pay. And that fee schedule allows 1/3 of our participating institutions to participate for free. We redesigned and launched a new website, and also access to the database through faceted search filters. We've held several meetings that many of you have attended, and I really appreciate the turnout we get for those of stakeholder meetings to imagine Digital Scriptorium and reimagine it for what we now call DS 2.0. We applied for and we're successfully getting a $100,000 planning grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That grant, we just finished that up, but to create a bridge of funding for us between that grant and applying for another grant, which is in progress, we're able to raise $100,000 from institutions to support the continued development of DS 2.0. We've brought in 5 new voting members and 1 new associate institution, and we are in the middle of a transition of moving the technical host of DS from UC Berkeley to University of Pennsylvania. And again, we'll talk about Lynn Ransom and her colleagues will talk about what's going on with that later on in the meeting. And as I mentioned, I can't take credit for all of this. I'm so privileged to have served with the people who have been on the board with me since 2015. And all of you, I mean, there's people at this meeting that don't even belong to DS, but they really care about manuscripts, they care about manuscript studies, they care about libraries and special collections, and I'm really grateful for the participation of all of you. As I mentioned, we are now working on an implementation grant application to IMLS, and we already submitted the pre-proposal for that. Lynn Ransom, who is soon to be DS president, is a project investigator on the previous grant and the one that was in progress. And Emma Thomson is the project manager. And as I mentioned, they're going to talk more about that later in the meeting. We're also having elections at this meeting. And so this is a important meeting for that reason. The three of us stepping down are Cherry Williams from UC Riverside, who has served as a director at large for the last 6 years. E.C. Schroeder, as you know, is just retired from being the head of the Beinecke Library at Yale. He was also, more important to us, he was DS treasurer for the last 6 years. And EC stepping down, and myself, I'm going off the board as of this meeting. And then the board members who are going to continue to serve are Janine Pollock, who's agreed to stay on as vice president just for a year to help with the transition. David Faulds, who is moving from at-large position to secretary. Lynn, who is moving from executive director to, or from secretary to president and executive director. Lynn Grigsby, who's going to stay on as a technical host as long as DS is still at UC Berkeley, although we expect that transition to happen this year. Lisa Fagan Davis, who is the chair of the advisory council and who we pulled into the board as with an ex officio seat. And then we will have, after the elections, I'm hopeful that we will approve the election of Ray Clemens from Yale, Tamar Evangelestia-Dougherty from Cornell, and Susan Steuer from Western Michigan. Also, as Lisa Fagan Davis will explain to us later, advisory council is going to have some changes. We are lucky to still have Constable Dutchke, Barbara Schiller, Bill Stoneman continue to serve on the advisory council, while we're making new appointments to Eric Johnson of Ohio State and Elizabeth Hebert of Indiana University. I'm so excited. I really am delighted to welcome all the new people and very excited to have the kind of talent and commitment, expertise, and dedication, enthusiasm, and energy of the people that are joining the board and advisory council, and especially I'm just thankful for all of you. I always sign off my emails to you. Thank you for your support of Digital Scriptorium, but I really do mean it. We couldn't just be doing this, even with the talent we have on the board, without the support and the emotional ownership that you all bring to participating in DS. I really have been privileged to work with all of you during this time. And that's respectfully submitted. That's my director's report for this year and the last 6 years. Thanks very much. So I'm going to take us back to the agenda. Here we go.
Deborah, do you want to ask if there are any questions?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions about the report? I mean, we're going to cover a lot of what I talked about during the rest of the meeting. But if you have any questions now, feel free to ask them. Lisa has a hand up.
Yeah, I just want to, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone, I just want to thank you, Deborah, for your years of service and your uncounted volunteer hours spent reforming and bringing more order and more transparency and more sustainability to Digital Scriptorium. We are all so grateful for you, and generations of manuscript scholars will thank you as well.
Well, thanks a lot. Thank you, Lisa. Back at you, everybody, really.
I want to add personal expense. We often forget that people spend their own money to travel to meetings. And I know, Deborah, you did. So I think that's phenomenal. Thanks
a lot. And it's a privilege to serve with you as well, Lynn. I mean, Lynn Grigsby's been ex officio on our board since even before I was president, since about 2010. And we're so grateful for all of the time and expertise that you've given to us, Lynn. I gotta give a shout out to Lynn Grigsby. So anybody else have a question? Thanks a lot, guys. So what I'd like to do now is go to our next report, which comes from E.C. Schroeder, our treasurer, and again, who has really helped us get DS into a really good financial, stable financial position. Take it away, EC.
Can you, can I share my, can you
Yeah,
delete
I'll
your
unshare.
screen? Yeah.
I'll stop sharing. There you go.
Thank you. All right. Oops. And Lynn, I think I need to be I'm currently disabled.
Okay, on it.
I think that works. All right, I got it. Let's see, make sure I have the right one. Okay. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So I just want to do a very quick overview of our three sources of funding and how they get spent. So the first is just dues. Everyone should have received invoices from Berkeley in July. If you did not, please. Please I think someone needs to mute their microphone. And anyway, if you have not received an invoice and you were expecting one or it didn't come to you, please let me know or Deborah know. At this point, we're still in the transition phase, and we'll talk to folks at Berkeley. The second piece is just to highlight that if all institutions are able to make their contribution, we see every year in dues about $31,750. That number has been shifting and changing over the last 2 to 3 years as we've had members join us, and a couple of members unfortunately had to drop out. Just a reminder, this funding was used to support the work that Berkeley did in terms of hosting DS and both the database itself as well as the website. And we do not cover all of their costs, so this was in some ways there is a gift in kind from Berkeley. Just looking ahead with the move of the database to Penn, we will also be transitioning for 2022. Dues will be managed through University of Pennsylvania next year. Second is we have I call it an operating account. Is the best way. So for incidentals, so this is non-database, non-website costs. We have a checking account and a savings account at Bank of America. It's also where we will deposit any donations that we receive. As noted, we received $3,024 and I'm not certain why 15 cents, but that's what we got as a donation in the last year. And in the past, we've used it if we've had to cover for an annual meeting, expenses involving the annual meeting, or any incidentals. Generally, we run a very, very lean ship. So we're happy to have more in this, but we don't use it that heavily, or have not used it that heavily. Deborah mentioned we had an ILS grant last year. What year are we in? We're in 2021, sorry, last year. And we, because of the pandemic, weren't able to move ahead with applying for a follow-up grant. And so we reached out to some of our institutions to help provide bridge funding so we could continue the progress that we made in terms of from the planning grant. And we were able to raise among the institutions $101,000, which was really exciting because it allowed us to keep going, which is really important, and keep that momentum. And I think we'll see the impact of the funding, the continual funding in later presentations. If for some reason your institution, you feel like your institution is sitting around with some spare cash, holler. We're more than willing to take that as well, or to use that. And I'm very excited by what the results of this. I think this is going to really transition and make Digital Scriptorium move into the 21st century, but also really set us up to expand both members and participation. So, questions?
I just want to clarify one thing that Penn hasn't yet confirmed.
Sorry. Yes, I was jumping the gun.
We're working in that direction. So
yeah. I'm not seeing hands or anything. So if there's someone who has something, either speak up or bounce up and down.
I have something to add. First of all, the funny numbers with the donations has to do with PayPal taking out a fee if you use our PayPal account online, which we're very glad to have you use, but it'll explain on the website that PayPal takes out a certain fee when you
Right.
use it, and that's how we get the funny numbers. The
I
other
should have
thing I want to
remembered
mention
that.
to the board is that that we need to keep $3,000 in the reason our checking accounts has as much money in it as it does is we need to keep $3,000 in the checking. That's the Bank of America's minimum for us to have a small business account for which we don't have to pay a monthly fee. But the new board, you might want to decide to move some of that into savings if you wish to, because we might not need all of that. You only need 3,000 in the checking. And then the other thing I'd really like to say is I really want to thank EC for the bridge funding, because EC drove that project and brought all that money in to help. Especially so we could keep going with the DS 2.0, the way we're planning it. The grants didn't line up. We couldn't have the planning grant finished in time to apply for the implementation grant. So this really helps us to keep going through that year until we were able to apply for the next phase of the grant process. So thank you so much, EC, for doing that.
My pleasure. It was in some ways an easy lift because of the work we've done over the last 2 or 3 years. And I think because we've seen the progress as usual, like getting people to buy into it, made it more straightforward. Anyway, thank you. And I will
Thanks very
stop
much.
sharing.
Thanks,
And-
EC.
Yep.
So, and then on the agenda, we're going to move from EC's report to Lisa Fagan-Davis. What can you tell us
Hello.
about the advisory council?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh, it's so nice to see all your faces. I can't wait till we can see each other in 3D. So this year, the advisory council, we said goodbye to 2 members who stepped down to make room for new members, James Marrow and David Gans, who had been with Digital Scriptorium, I think, from the very beginning. I'm very grateful to them for years and years of service, decades of service. In stepping in to the advisory council, as Deborah mentioned, are 2 very esteemed manuscript scholars, Elizabeth Hebard, who's in the French department at Indiana University, and Eric Johnson, who is the curator of special collections at Ohio State. I'm really grateful to both of you for agreeing to join us on this adventure, and look forward to working with both of you. The main business of the advisory council this year was figuring out what it is the advisory council actually does and how it works. I should say also that still on the advisory council are Ray Clemens for the rest of the day until, presuming he's elected to the board, Consuelo Dougherty, who you all know is the foundress of Digital Scriptorium, Barbara Shaler and William Stoneman, all 3 of whom have also been with Digital Scriptorium for decades from the beginning, and very grateful to them for their continued service. So what we did was worked with the Digital Scriptorium board to establish term limits and a process for appointment to the advisory council. I was appointed the chair and added to the Digital Scriptorium board ex officio and without vote, as a way to improve communication and to liaise between the Digital Scriptorium board and the advisory council. The function of the advisory council really is to represent the user community. Members of Digital Scriptorium represent institutions, whereas the members of the advisory council, we're all manuscript scholars, and that's our role, is to think about how Digital Scriptorium is working for us as researchers. And over the next year or 2, as Digital Scriptorium 2.0 takes place, the advisory council will play, I think, a really fundamental role in thinking about the interface and the functioning, the design of DS 2.0. So we will definitely, the advice of this group, I think, will be really instrumental. So I'm looking forward to working with all of them and to working with the board as we take Digital Scriptorium into this next phase. Thank you.
Hey, Lisa. Thank you so much, Lisa, for the great job you're doing with this for us. you know, we've been wanting to energize the activity of the advisory council in some kind of structural way, because it wasn't there before, and it's not the people serving on the advisory council's fault. It's been our fault that we haven't really created a role for them. So really, really looking forward to what you're doing with this. And anybody have any questions for Lisa? Okay, so I'm going to turn this over now to Janine Pollock, because we're going to move into the elections, and Janine's going to run that part of the meeting for us. So take it away, Janine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you everyone who's here today, and your commitment to Digital Scriptorium. But first order of business is to I want to announce the candidates for the board. So on your agenda, if you want to follow along on page 2, the candidates for DS Board of Directors for the coming year. So that means that at the close of this meeting, the terms start for all of these folks, and the terms are here where you see after the names. So for President, Lynn Ransom from the University of Pennsylvania. She will continue with 1 3-year term, which will be once renewable in 2027. Myself, as Deborah mentioned, serving till next year this time. David Falls, who will be serving 1 more 3-year term, 1 3-year term, once renewable to 2027. And that's a new role for him, stepping up from Director at Large. Vanessa Wilkie from the Huntington Library, she will take on the role of Treasurer now until 2024, with 1 renewable term to possibly 2027. And then we have our new candidates for Director at Large from and these are partial terms, which will help us to have continuity and not the disruption of everybody leaving at once. For Tamar Evangelestia-Dougherty from Cornell University, we'll have a 1-year partial term with the possibility of 2 additional 3-year terms. Ray Clemens from Yale University, Director at Large for a 2-year term till 2023, with the possibility of 2 additional 3-year terms. And then Susan Steuer from Western Michigan University, 2021 to 2024. So that's 1 3-year term with then the possibility of 1 additional 3-year term. So for our new candidates to the slate, I wanted to give you a chance to just introduce yourselves and say what you do at your institution. Tamar?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tamar Evangelestia-Dougherty. I'm the Associate University Librarian for Rare and Distinctive Collections at Cornell University. And I just want to thank everyone in the DS community for welcoming us over the past year. We joined only about a year ago, and already I'm a member of the DS Steering Committee, and just enjoying wonderful just community with Lynn and Lisa and Deborah and everyone, and looking forward to contributing to this. What I'd like to bring to this role is an increased footprint for DS around programming, scholarships and symposia and things of that nature. Thank you very much.
Okay. And Ray?
Hi, I'm Ray Clemens. I'm the curator of early books and manuscripts at the Beinecke Library at Yale University. Like Tamar, I'm very excited to be serving on the board for the first time. I think the area that I'm most excited about is during these planning sessions, a lot of people talked about teaching roles that we could use around DS. Not only to bring DS into our own classrooms, but to use DS to reach out and to catalog collections, to teach these types of skills. I think it can be a real focus for the community that's working with that's working with manuscripts in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. And Sue?
I'm Sue Steuer. I'm the Special Collections Librarian at Western Michigan University, and I'm interested in this. I'm thrilled to be involved and interested in reaching out to schools, perhaps with less huge and well-known collections, to try and get those cataloged and get them involved with DS so that that material is no longer hidden.
Thanks, Sue. So let's get this election going. So what we're going to ask you to do on the second page of your agenda, under the slate of candidates, there is, just for your reference, the institutions with DS voting membership. So only one person, usually it's the institutional representative from each of these institutions listed here, is allowed to vote. And it's going to be, because this is it's uncontested, we will be asking just for a yay or a nay. And what I'll ask you to do is put this in the chat. So with your name will be there, your institution, and then your vote, yes or no, and then we will proceed from there. Okay, and that so I would say the yeses have it. So congratulations, everyone, and thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to your contributions in the next several years, and as we just move on with all of the plans you're going to be hearing about today, and that you've heard already, the accomplishments.
Yay.
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations, everybody. This is really exciting.
Congratulations.
And thank you so much, Janine. And again, I want to recognize Janine. Janine's been involved with DS from very early on. I mean, I first worked for Janine at the Free Library when the Free Library started digitizing their collections to get into DS. And so I really do appreciate Janine's involvement in DS for over all these years. So thank you so much. And welcome aboard, everybody, right, Janine?
Absolutely. Welcome and thank you again. And I will say that as a public librarian, curator, administrator, I've always just felt welcome in this community, and I think it bodes well for just bringing the collections together. As Sue said, sort of digging deep and seeing what else is out there, and how we can
That's a great point, Janine. That, you know, we've really Lynn's going to talk about this more later, but we're really interested in making DS as inclusive as we can, and so to have public libraries involved is really important. I think for the reach that DS can have, and even beyond the ivory covered walls of the, you know, academia. So it's so awesome that that the free library's been involved for as long as it has been.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you very much.
You
So
made an
let's-
IT person feel involved and included.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I know I was always the token, but you never made me feel that way.
All right. No way. No,
So-
we need all the nerds we can find, you know. Because
So my next
know-
order of business is to recognize the you know, people who are departing this board, and thanks everybody for stealing all my material, because we've already talked about, you know, the accomplishments and the, you know, sort of building it on the foundation of, you know, and I think of it as, you know, building it upon the foundation of the intellectual rigor that it was started with, and putting, you know, an infrastructure in place that has allowed us to be where we are now, poised to reinvent ourselves and you know, for the next, who knows, you know, 10 years, 20 years, but it's some needed, a needed uplift and change to the data structure. But I can't, you know, so I can, because it's, you know, been such a, you know, this sort of, you know, party that of 8 that we've been as a board, and with Emma this past year 9, the party that everyone's welcome to, and so a couple, you know, we're losing a few of our, you know, best and brightest. So I wanted to, you know, first recognize Cherry Williams, who at University of Riverside, Director of Distinctive Collections there, and who welcomed us for a very memorable meeting, and with a memorable dinner at the Mission Inn in Riverside. It was like
right.
amazing, you know, and again, as you know, someone mentioned, you know, the institutions are supporting some of us for travel, but some, you know, some not necessarily, but we've been able to be, you know, we've had the hospitality of these great institutions, and just great people. So, and, you know, Cherry coming from the Lilly Library before that, and, you know, she was a good get, because she has been around special collections for a while, and active in the RBMS, and just a voice of, you know, calm and good direction and advice for the past 6 years, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know her and work with her. And then EC at EC, sorry, let's see, retired now, director of the Bunke Library. With his large portfolio of responsibilities, you would think he would not have the time of day for something like this, but really devoted his resources and you know, connections and capacity to building this and making us financially sustainable. And of course, Deborah. So Deborah has, you know, in the time I've known her, and it's always been involved with Digital Scriptorium somehow, right? Because we started with the free library project that was the digitization project in 2004 or 2005 that was tied to getting our records into the Digital Scriptorium. And even though it was a rocky road with that,
Yeah.
she was always there, she's so generous with her time and with her knowledge and skills to help that project, which was really, it was really one of the, most challenging projects that I've ever been a part of. And then to have the passion for sharing these manuscripts with everyone, and to devote her time and treasure to getting this on solid footing, sort of organizationally, and always with the thought of the integrity of the data and the keeping good relations with the members. I think it's been really a pleasure and a great example for how this project will live on. And I think that's it. I just thank you all for your service, and I invite anyone else who wants to. I don't know if you have time for that, but my words are probably inadequate. I'm sure I'm forgetting things. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Denise. And yes, especially thank you, Cherry and EC, for stepping down, and then really, just wonderful people to work with. We were really lucky. We had a really wonderful board that was just plowed through one challenge after the next, and then dusted ourselves off and said, okay, what's next? And it's just been wonderful to work with all of you. Really going to miss that aspect of stepping down. And let's see what we like to move, unless there's any other questions about the elections. We have new board, fantastic. We have new advisory council, and we actually have a new member. We have a new voting member in DS this year. It's really exciting, and Vanessa Wilkie is going to tell us about that.
Thank you. I will start just by, we don't have a formal report because we did the vote on welcoming our new member institution of Princeton. We did it remotely in the last year. So Princeton has been a member in the last couple of months, but I will share in the chat. This is a link to all of our current members on the web page and the participants. And I would be remiss not to take this moment, since everyone is here on a Zoom call, to say, if you are representing an institution that is not a member of DS, I welcome an opportunity to talk with you. And I basically have a PowerPoint presentation to give you that to make your pitch to your administrators as to why they should be giving you money to participate in this vibrant and quite special community. So please, I know this has been an extremely difficult time, the idea of taking on any kind of new project or new consortium is a bit overwhelming. So I am trying to rein in my hostess welcome wagon side and not hunt down each one of you, because I know your email addresses. But I would love the opportunity to talk with you about joining Digital Scriptorium or just learning more if you have any questions. That said, it is with great pleasure that I welcome Princeton University to the Digital Scriptorium fold. And they have graciously offered to give us a presentation and an introduction to their manuscript holdings. So I believe that I am passing the mic to my new DS community member, Emma Sarconi at Princeton, who is the Deputy AUL of Special Collections. So Emma, I'm not sure if you need screen sharing abilities, and Lynn, if you could do that.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. I do want to clarify that I am here on behalf of the Deputy AUL. I am not the Deputy AUL. That is Will Knoll. So I would hate to take that title away from him because he's doing a great job. But hello, everyone. My name is Emma Sarconi, and I am the outreach, or the reference and outreach specialist for special collections at Princeton. And I do have a PowerPoint with a tiger, because at Princeton, you can't do anything without having a tiger on it. Okay, so I am part of the Public Services Department. And like I said, I'm here on behalf of Will Knoll, our AUL, who sends his regards today. And I am so happy to be here, and Princeton is so excited to be a part of this project. We think we have a lot to offer and look forward to collaborating and contributing with everybody who's a part of this endeavor. And it's just, we're very excited. And we know that in the past, our collections haven't always been the easiest to access, but we're actively making strides to change that, and like participating in the collaborative cataloging project proposed by Digital Scriptorium. So with that, I want to take 5 minutes to share with y'all a little about the 8 kinds of Princeton holdings that might grace the pages of Digital Scriptorium someday, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the kind of material that we have here related to this project. What I'm going to be talking about today are materials that are already digitized and available via our IIIF system that we call FIGI. Why we call it FIGI is a long story, but we have a lot more here that hasn't been digitized. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I think a lot of these things are pretty cool, and I hope you do too. So to briefly go over some things. So first up, we have the lovely Blickling homilies from Anglo-Saxon England, one of the oldest collections of sermons to survive from medieval England, which is held by the Scheide Library, a subsection of special collections here at Princeton, at call number 30.2. We also have a lovely 11th century benedictional from Lorsch Abbey. And if you just look at that characteristic Etonian illumination done in silver and gold at call number Garrett MS 43. We also have a very choice collection of Middle English manuscripts, including at least 84 extant manuscripts of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, including this lovely one from the 15th century. We also at Princeton hold a collection. We hold the collection of prolific collector Robert Garrett, which essentially makes up the backbone of our manuscript holdings on the whole. Much of what has been presented so far was once Garrett's, if you've been paying attention to the call numbers, but here in particular, we have Garrett manuscript number 3, a gorgeous Byzantine gospel book from the 12th century. So that's just one example of all of the Garrett holdings that we have. Our collection also expands beyond present-day Europe, which I'm very pleased is an area that Digital Scriptorium is going to include. One of these is I think I went one slide too far. One of these is our subcollections of Ethiopian manuscripts. Sorry. Oh no, that's right. Ethiopian manuscripts, including 600 Helian scrolls. We are especially eager to catalog and digitize those, but there should be an image of homilies of the Archangel Michael and associated texts, which is Garrett manuscript 2, which I don't think is what's up right now. Oh, of course. Technology. There we go. So that's Garrett manuscript 2, the homilies of the Archangel Michael and associated text, which is from the 18th century. This, which you've been already looking at, is one of our more recent purchases. This is a Hebrew Arabic dictionary, Ali Ben Israel, from the 11th century, which we would also love to contribute to the project. And we are very proud of our significant collection of papyri, including this example of a deed of gift made to the Church of Ravenna in late Roman cursive, which we would very much like to contribute to Digital Scriptorium if we determine that that is within scope. So lastly, I think I saved the best for last. We think that one of our biggest contributions to Digital Scriptorium will be our Islamic manuscripts holdings. We have 16,000 manuscripts, Islamic manuscripts in our collection, which is we are told is the largest single collection in North America. We have just started an effort to enhance description and digitize 1,600 of these, but are constantly photographing new copies for patronage around the world. I run our email service, and this is one of our most requested and most emailed about collections. This in particular is a page from an illuminated collection of 4 epic poems that is in imitation of Nizami Ganjavi Kamasa. I only speak English, so please forgive me if I pronounce that wrong, which has 8 full-page miniatures in the classic Persian style, but was executed in the 20th century. It's one of the most beautiful books that I've ever seen, and it's a forgery, which makes it also one of the most intriguing. So that's some of what we have here, some of what we think is relevant to the work that we'll be doing through Digital Scriptorium. But if you would like to know more about Princeton's collections, please do not hesitate to email me at esarconi@princeton.edu. And a reminder that during non-pandemic times, Princeton Special Collections is open to the public without prior authorization of any kind. And although we cannot currently welcome our researchers from outside the Princeton community, we have digitization and virtual reference options available to anybody interested. So you can email me or use the Ask Us form on our website to learn more about those programs and those options available to you. So thank you so much for the time. And we at Princeton very much look forward to playing a full role in making Digital Scriptorium the success that we really would love it to be. So thank you again. Stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Emma. Thanks, Vanessa, for introducing all that. Sorry to promote you at Will's expense. That's my fault. I got that off your webpage. So I'm still looking at it. Princeton thinks you're deputy AUL for special collections, or at least your webmaster does.
Well,
yes.
they don't pay me that amount. So that so maybe I should bring that up with someone.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, congratulations. You just got a promotion.
Thank you. Yeah, what a lovely promotion no one told me about. But yeah, I'll have to talk to them about that, because that is absolutely not my title. But I do work here, and Will does say hello. So thank you all so much. I'm so happy to be working with y'all.
Oh, thanks a lot. And we're really looking forward to having Princeton involved with this project. And especially one of the aspirations we have for DS is to diversify the collections and bring in a lot of non-Western manuscripts in the future. And Lynn Ransom is going to talk about that too. So we're really excited about the Islamic manuscript collection at Princeton, and we're looking forward to bringing in, I would say, let's bring that forgery in. That sounds like a lot of fun. So anyway, so thank you so much, Emma, and thanks to Will as well. So I think we're ready to turn this over to Lynn Ransom, Emma Thomson, Doug Emery, and people from Penn who are going to tell us about what's been going on with DS 2.0 and what we've done and what we hope to be doing in the next couple of years. So Emma, do you want to get started? I'll let you start with that.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And hi, everyone. It's great to see you all again. I'm really excited to share with you all of the progress that we've made over the past year with DS 2.0. So the remainder of the meeting is going to be about our redevelopment project. And I'm going to start by giving an update on our progress over the past year and share a sample record from our DS 2.0 prototype database. And Doug Emery, who is our technical consultant and leads the Cultural Heritage Computing Group at Penn, is going to go over our data transformation process as it is right now. And then Lynn is going to talk about where we're heading in the future with implementation under her leadership as executive director. So let me just share my screen. So first off, our planning year that was funded by the IMLS has ended. That ended in July. We've created a bunch of documentation related to our planning year. There's 3 project reports, an environmental scan, a current data assessment, and all of this is available on the DS website. We held 2 stakeholder meetings, actually 1 planning meeting and 1 stakeholder meeting. And those recordings are all available on our DS YouTube channel. And you can find a link to that channel on the DS website as well. And we've also been in contact with our member reps over the past year with surveys and requests for information to help us in our planning project. So thank you so much to everyone who has been so gracious in answering my questions over the past year. We're in a great position to start our bridge year, which started in August. And thank you again to EC and to all of our bridge year funders who have made this possible. The bridge year funding allows us to continue with project management and prototype development of the DS 2.0 database over the next year as we hopefully wait for more funding from the IMLS. So I want to emphasize that the bridge year work that we're beginning now is dedicated to back-end development. So we're developing the DS 2.0 database. And that means that the new DS 2.0 website and user interface will not be developed until the implementation phase. And that's going to begin in August of next year, with or without funding from the IMLS. So I just wanted to refresh your memories a bit about the new DS 2.0 data model. We presented this in April at our stakeholder meeting. And this is the new data model designed by our developer, Mikko Koho, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Semantic Computing Research Group at the University of Helsinki. And basically, this is a linked open data model. So all of these boxes represent triple patterns. And it's a lot simpler than it seems. And it actually is simpler than the current DS 2.0 or the current DS data model. And I think Doug is going to go over this in more detail during his part of the presentation. But I just wanted to refresh your memories about this. And I'm going to chat out a link to the image now so that you can look at it in a little more detail. So I think this is where Doug is going to jump in and talk about how we are transferring data into the new DS 2.0 platform.
Yeah, can I take over the screen share?
Sure.
It'd be easier to, okay, great. I need permission.
You should have it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure how this is going to work if I start this presentation up, if you'll be able to. All right. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, great. So the core idea here is that we will have a process in place that allows people to contribute their data as they have it in some structured format. And then we, well, the Digital Scriptorium project will be responsible for converting that data to a single unified spreadsheet format, which we can then ingest into a system like OpenRefine, which some of us on the Penn side have experience with, in order to clean the data and to enhance it and then ingest it into the Digital Scriptorium platform, which will be a linked data platform. And right now we're working with Wikibase, and that's our intention. That's the basic, the backend platform that we'll use, and the front end will be built upon that. And the key piece here is that people can provide us with their structured data, and we will be responsible for making that enhancement. This is a summary of essentially the four-step process, and we've really been working on three pieces of this. So for the purposes of our prototype. There's accepted source data in multiple formats, convert it to a common CSV format for OpenRefine upload, and then in OpenRefine, clean and enhance the data, linking it to authorities, and then finally ingest the data into our DS backend Wikibase instance. The main thing the one thing that we haven't done as a part of this process is much of the enhancement and cleaning, but I can give an indication of what some of that will look like. So for the purposes of this experiment, about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I started working on a few different source types. We chose MARC records from Penn, from the Penn collection, TEI from the Open project, just to demonstrate that we can do this from TEI. So I chose a couple of free library manuscripts that were actually created for the bibliophily project using a spreadsheet mechanism. So this is a case where we've extracted data from one spreadsheet format to generate TEI. And so we don't have a TEI, a spreadsheet example here, but this is something that's quite doable. Then the current Digital Scriptorium METS mods data, took a number of those records, rather arbitrarily tried to get some samples from different institutions in order to get a sense of how the data is represented across different institution records in current Digital Scriptorium. This again here's the image of the data model. It does look rather complicated. There are a number of parts to it. The core of the data model is the manuscript, which has a DS ID, and this is the focal pivot point of the record, that there is a manuscript and it has a unique identifier that stays with that manuscript regardless of how it might be described in different holding institutions. There's a holding record that's associated with the manuscript that provides information like the institution, what the institution's call number is, perhaps its unique catalog identifier, as well as information about how long it's been how long that set of data is correct. And one of the ideas here is that if at a single institution the call number were to change or the internal identifier were to change, we would create a new holding record which would allow people using the current data to be able to find the manuscript and also to know how it was historically designated. The manuscript itself is connected to the DS record, and this is where most of the data lives. This is a description of the manuscript, and the idea is that we will, the institutions that provide the data are responsible for providing the description, which we will then enhance and put into the correct format for Digital Scriptorium ingestion. The record itself, the description, uses linked data methods in order to connect the manuscript to authors. So the actor you see here, these are any type of participant who's involved with the manuscript. So authors, scribes, artists, former owners, also information about material, physical description, language, place of production, date information, whether or not the manuscript itself is dated. We've taken that information and created a data dictionary, which you see part of here, where we, as an exercise, we identified each one of the fields that was a key part of the Digital Scriptorium data set, how it's defined, and then what kind of data it is. So at the beginning here, you'll see that there's a holding institution, and we don't have a definition for it, but what it is a URI that uniquely identifies that institution. And while you see VIAF here, you'll see when I show you the sample data that we have in fact linked the holding institution to the Wikibase Wikidata record for each one of the institutions. There's also, so the holding institution ID, the shelf mark, the internal identifier of online catalogs, if those are available, depending on what the data source is. again, and then production place is recorded. So text values that are coming in from the field, coming in from the data source, and then production place, which would be the enhancement work that would be done in order to link it up to an authority file. So this is a small piece of the generated spreadsheet. So I'm actually just going to jump over and show you the sample spreadsheet now. Let me get out. Okay, so the sample spreadsheet looks like this. There are about 7 records from the University of Pennsylvania, one which is called test because I messed around with the data inside the XML a little bit in order to make this visible. The 2 free library records that are based on TEI, and then the Digital Scriptorium records, which are coming from METs and MODs. And again, these were chosen somewhat arbitrarily in order to get a range of examples of way that the data is appearing in those data sets. And I'll say that I took these different XML sources and spent about, I would say over the past 4 weeks, spent about 30 hours, about 10 hours on each one of the scripts to extract the data. So for purposes of displaying it in a way that might be easier to understand, I've actually transposed the data on a second sheet. So you can see coming down the left-hand column here, you can see the field name, and then in these columns on the right, you can see the actual values, which is a little bit easier, slightly better presentation for reading. So here at the top, you see here's the institution as recorded, and you'll see this a lot through the spreadsheet. So with they're pulling in the information as it's recorded in the record, and then also providing a place where the information can be provided either presently or in the future during an enhanced cleaning process as a unique identifier. So here's the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, and here's Wellesley College. Here's the shelf mark that's coming in from, in this case, from the Mark Metz record. So this is the Digital Scriptorium data. The holding institution. So in this case, I actually have up an example of the Wellesley record in Wikibase, Wikidata, which is actually built on Wikibase, the platform that we've selected as the backend database for Digital Scriptorium 2.0. So you'll see here's the information about Wellesley. And one of the things that's great about this is by using, you can see here the kind of information that's connected to the Wellesley record in Wikidata. And it means that by using these sorts of, and many of you already know this, but by using these sorts of identifiers in our data set, we can then link out to the web of information that's available about, in this case, about the institution. And the same thing holds for places and people and other types of organizations that would be linked to from these catalog records. I mean, from these description records, from the DS 2.0 data. So, I'm jumping around a little bit too much. There we are. So, and then in those cases where it's available, we can add a IIIF manifest. You see here we have the production places recorded, where we have a production place. Again, this would be a URI that links to an authority. The date as recorded, which can then be parsed as a part of an enhancement process, whether or not the manuscript is dated. This is information that comes from, that's coming from the DS METs and MODs. Information about the uniform title, if it's coming from MARC records. Also, the title is recorded, which uses there's a MARC field number here, but this is actually a general field for the title is recorded. We can also, I'm going to scoot over here to the left a little bit and show you that we can, when it's available, we can pull non-Roman versions, non-Roman script versions of titles. We also have the ability to do this for the names of individuals where it's available. And this is MARC records are very strong for this. We can pull in a genre information. These are actually coming from the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus. These genre as recorded values. If it's available, we can then link to URIs that are connected to those genres. We can also do the same thing for subject. And so again, this is coming from MARC records. Here is author information coming from MARC records, and you see we have available the non-Roman script version of the name. I'm going to scoot back over to the METS data that's coming from Digital Scriptorium. We can pull language information where that's available. We also have the ability, we'll be translating those into language codes, standard language codes, former owner as recorded information. So this is actually pulling provenance information, which depending on the record and its source may or may not have parsable name values. And of course, this is something that we'll deal with in the enhancement process. The material, physical description. The physical description is very rich in many of these records, and this can be pulled into a single place. And then finally, the acknowledgements that are available from the DS data. Emma is gonna, I think this gives you a good sense of what can be done. It was actually relatively easy to do this, to write a few scripts and then to extract the data from the sources that we have. And I can answer specific questions about this. And after the meeting, I'll talk to Emma about getting a link to this sample spreadsheet so you can get a sense of what the data looks like when it's been transferred to when it's being extracted. And again, I'll say that remind everyone that this is provisional, but the thing that's interesting is that it just took a few weeks in order to, and not actually much of the time of those few weeks in order to generate the scripts, in order to extract the data to generate this spreadsheet, which can then be used for ingestion into the Wikibase instance. And Emma's going to give you, I think, Emma, you're going to give an example of that.
Yep.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
All right, thanks, Doug. You were getting accolades in the chat.
Thank you.
So I am going to share a sample record from our Wikibase prototype, but I wanted to start by just clarifying a couple of terms because we've been using a lot of words that start with the prefix wiki, and it's confusing to keep them separate, but it's really important that you do keep them separate in your mind because they're very different things. So Wikibase is an open source software suite that's used for creating linked open data. It's used by a lot of different projects in the cultural heritage community. So Wikibase is just a software suite. Wikidata is a specific project powered by that software suite. It's probably one of the most well-known linked open databases. It powers a lot of the Wikipedia articles. It's a great knowledge base that we are going to link DS to. DS 2.0 is also a database project that is powered by the Wikibase software. So our DS 2.0 database records look similar to Wikidata records, but they're completely separate projects. Wikidata and DS 2.0 are not integrated and will never be. You cannot search for DS 2.0 records in Wikidata. You will be able to find eventually our DS manuscript identifiers and our name authority identifiers that we're going to link to Wikidata in the future. So with that, let's look at one of our sample records. So this is a test record in our DS Wikibase. And this is all data that we have transferred from Doug's spreadsheet that he just showed you. And that goes for the next 3 slides. This is all coming from that spreadsheet. So this is data that was harvested from a Penn MARC record. And you see at the top the title of the manuscript and its DS identifier. But keep in mind that we're just at the beginning of the testing phase. So we're just importing data right now. We haven't had the ability to develop our authority file management system or our DS identifier workflow yet. So the DS ID that you see here is just a placeholder for the testing phase. And over the bridge year, we're going to start automating this process of creating permanent identifiers for every manuscript in DS. So this is just another screenshot further down the record showing a selection of the data fields that were transferred over. You'll see the DS identifier, the language as recorded. Eventually this will have authority management linked to it. We have the physical description that was transferred and the production date as recorded. We're also going to harmonize the dates for searching. And then at the bottom here, we see an associated name. So this is a former owner of the manuscript, Larry Schoenberg. And you see here that we have included a link to his VIAF identifier. So this type of authority control will allow us to standardize Larry's name in every instance as it appears across the database. And it will also help us automate the harmonization process when we're getting records that have his name in different formats submitted to DS. So the authority management is going to give you all much more reliable search results than what you're currently able to create with the legacy DS system. And eventually we will have our own DS IDs for names, and we'll be able to share those identifiers with other projects in the same way that this VIAF ID is used here. And then the final screenshot shows images associated with this manuscript. And these are being displayed through a Mirador viewer in our Wikibase. So this is part of the magic of IIIF. We're able to access these images that are produced and distributed by Penn without having to actually download and store these images ourselves in our database. These images are viewable by simply linking to the IIIF manifest in our Wikibase. So this is how images in the DS user interface will also be displayed as well. But keep in mind that you don't have to have IIIF images in your records to participate in DS. The images are not mandatory, but it's just a great feature. So the big takeaway from this sample record is that our transformation process actually works that we proposed and came up with last year. So we're able to harvest manuscript data from a variety of different sources and standards and crosswalk them against our new data model and then upload them pretty easily into the DS 2.0 database. So we're really excited that our plans are working out so far. So here's a summary of everything we're hoping to accomplish over the next year in our bridge year. We just submitted today the pre-proposal for implementation funding from the IMLS. And then by the end of October, we're hoping to have 1,000 test records in the DS transition spreadsheet that Doug shared with you. And we're also working on developing our data update workflow and our authority management plan for manuscript IDs and names. And then by the end of November, we want to have 1,000 test records in the transformation process. So this is when we would apply our authority management plan and our data update workflow to the test records and get all of our all of our necessary data fields linked to the proper authority files. And then by the end of the year, we hope to have 1,000 test records uploaded to the Wikibase prototype. And then in 2022, we will hopefully be invited to submit a full proposal for implementation funding to the IMLS. We'll be notified if we can submit a full proposal in February of next year, and then the full proposal is due at the end of March. And then over the summer of next year, we'll hopefully be done with prototype development and be working on our beta version of the database. So by the end of May, we want to have 1,000 records in beta. And then by the end of June, have all DS legacy data in the beta database. And this legacy data will be from institutions who are dependent on DS as their only record for their manuscripts. And then in July, we're going to start harvesting data from DS members with external data sources like MARC and TEI records. And also in July, notification of whether we've received funding from the IMLS will be announced. And then in August, we will start our implementation work. And that's going to be possible with or without funding. We'll be able to do a lot more if we get funding, of course, but we do have a plan if we don't end up receiving funds from the IMLS. And I also wanted to mention that over the bridge year, the current DS database and website will be available. That's not going to be transferred over to Penn, hopefully, or another host institution. Nothing will change with the current DS website before July of next year. So I think that's it. And I'll hand things over to Lynn, who's going to talk more about what we're going to do after the bridge year.
Great, thanks, Emma. I'm going to share my screen. First, I want to say thank you to Emma and Doug and everyone else. Emma and Doug are a wonderful team to work with, and it's because of their hard work that we've gotten as far as we have, as well as the members of the of our sort of advisory committee of the people at Penn Libraries and the steering committee. And I'll show a slide of who's involved in that in a minute. But we've just done amazing work over the last year, and I'm really grateful to that. And also just to note, Deborah, I saw that you had a question. So after my little presentation spiel, we'll open this up for questions and discussion if anyone has questions. So for my part, we've just been looking at how at the sort of first 2/3 of this diagram that we've been showing. And what I want to do is talk about the second part. So in our vision for DS 2.0, we make this grand point that once the data has been transformed, DS 2.0 will give it to the world. And we have this globe signifying the world. And this is a statement that a lot of open access projects make to impress stakeholders and funders, but it's a rather vague statement to make. And so how exactly are we making digital scriptorium data available to the world beyond simply giving free and open access to a database being an online platform is something that I want to talk a little bit about right now. So what we mean by this statement, I believe, and it's important to think about this because I believe that this is where some of the added value of being members of the DS consortium and putting your pre-modern manuscripts data into DS 2.0 lies. And as you've heard from Emma, using Wikibase as our platform and leveraging Wikidata to create DS manuscript ID and names will allow us to expose digital scriptorium data to the global knowledge graph that is the semantic web. And so just to demonstrate what I mean by this, I would like to give you a brief demonstration of how a DS authority might work by showing you an example of a similar project involving the Schoenberg database of manuscripts name authority. And just to give you some background, since this summer, we've been working with a fellow that we have gotten from Drexel University's leading fellowship program, which matches early career librarians or graduates, PhD students in library science to institutions to work on data projects. And so our fellow this year is a man named LP Coladangelo, who, very luckily wanted to work on name authorities and is writing his dissertation on knowledge organization systems. So he's been excellent to have. And his project has been to put some of the Schoenberg database names into Wikidata and just to see what happens. The Schoenberg database has over 40,000 names of people associated with the production and trade of pre-modern manuscripts. And we've recently started looking into ways to leverage our name authority and to mesh it with other similar projects that are available on the semantic web in order to push the limits of research and discoverability that are imposed that are limits that are imposed on the Schoenberg database application itself. And we want to do this without actually having to change the database or the data model and reapply for funding to redevelop it yet again, or go back to retroactively add this data to these names. And so this is just a lot of work that we're trying to avoid. So as I said, as a test case, LP contributed to Wikidata over 9,000 Schoenberg database names that have matching VIAF numbers with names in Wikidata. So these Schoenberg database names are now part of the Wikidata ecosystem, and they're discoverable to anyone searching for information on these names. And to give you an idea about how this works and the value of it, I want to show you just this one example. So this is a Schoenberg database name record. And as you can see, the fields give you good information, and the record does link you to other entries. So here there's 4 entries in the Schoenberg database where this name is mentioned in the provenance. But the record kind of, it lacks other information that you might want if you're doing research on, let's say, a book owner and want to know like what his networks were, what his, occupation or her occupation. We don't have gender. We don't have things that could sort of really, enrich the picture of book collecting, for example, if you had this data. So our data is somewhat limited in that respect. So rather than trying to add all this, what we want to do, and I'm going to get out of screen share for a minute. Sorry about that. So what we've done is link our record to this record in Wikidata. So, sorry, this is not the record in Wikidata. Here it is. Okay. And what I want to do, you've seen this should now be familiar to you after looking at some of the slides that Emma and Doug shown, but this is the record for Abbas the Great. You get his name in different languages.
Lynn, we can't see your screen.
Oh, you can't see my screen. Okay. Hold on a second. Lost my Zoom. There it is. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So you're looking at the Wikidata entry for Abbas the Great. I was pointing out the Wikipedia entries where this person is represented in different languages. You get an image. And the column on the left, these are the properties that are associated with this person in Wikidata. So sex or gender, country of citizenship, name in native language, given name, noble title, date of birth, place of birth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Family networks, languages spoken, written, or signed, occupation, positions held. So what I'm trying to show you is you get a lot of data here. As you keep scrolling down, you get to the part where you see the identifiers to which this name is linked. So VIAF, ISNI, NORAF, some of these I don't know. There's a lot. Let me get down to the S's. And there's the Schoenberg database of manuscript. And so you can link to, from this record, you can link back to the Schoenberg database. And also from this record, these are my backup slides, or not from this record, but now that our data is in Wikidata, right? Now that these names are in Wikidata, what you can do is do queries that leverage the properties that are in the Wikidata name against the name that's in the Schoenberg database. So just to give you a really brief example, this query, which is done in Sparkle, and so this is something, you know, that you have to sort of learn how to do. But once you do, it really pays off. What this query is doing is looking for names in that have a Schoenberg database ID. Can you see my mouse, my pointer? Yeah. That have a child, and then optionally, if that name associated, if that child that's associated with the Schoenberg database ID has a child, then it'll show you the grandchild. So what we've done in this very simple query is given you, the researcher, the ability to start mapping these networks. And this is not something you can use. We can now get to Schoenberg data and enrich it through this Wikidata format. So you can't. So basically, what I'm saying is, like, you couldn't have done this without a lot of research. But now that it's in Wikidata, it just sort of happens automatically if those properties are associated with the names in the right way. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that gives you some idea of like the power of putting Digital Scriptorium manuscript IDs and names into this ecosystem. So as we flesh out the name ID and the manuscript ID, what we want to do is, by putting this data into this huge global knowledge graph, make it accessible to anybody who's searching in there, and then it will sort of funnel you back to Digital Scriptorium. Shut up with myself. And as Doug has shown you, getting your data into Digital Scriptorium is relatively easy once the mapping has been created. Transforming the data once it's in the spreadsheet is what the long-term work of Digital Scriptorium 2.0 will be in order to meet the last few objectives that we set out to achieve when we began this planning process. And these are the objectives. And what I'm highlighting here is employing linked and linkable data, which I've shown you how that can benefit Digital Scriptorium data. But it also supports interoperability with other manuscript research projects at a regional, national, international level. So now that our data is exposed in this way, it's very easy to give it and share it with other projects. It also, at the same time, enables content contributors to maintain management and ownership of the data. So as we are transforming and exposing your data, we are relying on you to keep your data clean, keep it up to date, but we will do that work for you, of like putting it out there. So I'm hoping to sort of lay some of the groundwork for what is the added value of membership to Digital Scriptorium. Let me just quickly, before switching gears a little bit, I just want to go through the implementation plan to let you know what we're doing. We're in the bridge year is year 2, where we're going to complete beta testing and implement changes that Emma talked about. And years 3 and year 4 are the final 2 years, and the grant will cover, if we get the grant, cover those 2 years. So assuming that we get funding, the idea is that we'll be able to sort of turbocharge DS 2.0 with a lot of data through having project management dedicated full time, and also a fellow who will be hired to help catalog manuscripts for those institutions who may not have expertise on staff. And also to, that fellow will also be helping in the process of transforming the data. Another thing that we will be doing, and I have this in year 4, but this is actually something that we'll be starting soon, is looking at how we might turn this into a manuscript description training program. So the fellow might, would be involved in developing this program. And that's something that we would like to try out to apply for further funding for. And this is part of what Ray and Tamar were saying in terms of developing program and teaching. This is how we can leverage Digital Script DS 2.0 into sort of expanding those services for membership. So just to sort of wrap up with some final thoughts, it is really thanks to this bridge year funding that we've been able to do this continued development and prototype testing. And we're really well placed to begin this work. So I want you to feel confident that even if we don't get funding, we can still continue with this. It will be a much slower process, but these are the things that we can do without funding. So just this last slide I want to show, this is just about what I was saying earlier about how we, in addition to, once we have implemented DS 2.0, then we can start sort of building out and growing the community of Digital Scriptorium and, bringing in new membership through these sort of added value benefits of a training program, leveraging Wikidata and that sort of thing. So as I step into the role of president and executive director, I do want to reassure you, our membership and our stakeholder community, that I believe that we are well placed to accomplish on time everything that we've set out to do. Our focus on the principles of low barrier data entry for institutions and scalability within a linked data environment will position DS 2.0 to contribute at a national and international level to the advancement of pre-modern manuscripts in the US and around the world. So my focus in these next 3 years, I'm going to stop sharing. My focus in the next 3 years will not only be the development of DS 2.0, but also the development of Digital Scriptorium as a consortium of members who value and benefit from participation in this unique community. So I, along with the rest of the incoming board, will be reaching out to current and future members in the coming months to touch base with you and get feedback on how Digital Scriptorium is working for you or could be working for you. The sustainability of Digital Scriptorium is based not on a technical platform, but on its membership. And we will need to focus on growing membership, and do the hard work of assessing finances in the next few years to see how we're going to sustain Digital Scriptorium beyond, the possibility of funding. So making sure that Digital Scriptorium proves to be a good return on your institution's investment is a priority for me. So in closing this part of the annual meeting, I want to say that I look forward to working with all of you on advancing Digital Scriptorium to the next level. And I am both honored and humbled to be elected the president and executive director. And before we close this presentation and open for discussion, I do want to acknowledge the work, the heavy lifting work that has gone before me, and that it is nothing to compare to what the work that we're about to take on now is nothing compared to what the previous leadership has accomplished to get us where we are. Consuelo Duchke began the project in 1997 and grew Digital Scriptorium to the level that we are now. Deborah Cashin, taking over in 2015, strengthened our governance and made us an official 501c3 and really actually built the foundation upon which we can proceed to evolve DS in the next generation. So both of these women leave enormous shoes for me to fill. And if I can contribute only half of what they have to the strengths of the Digital Scriptorium community, I will consider myself a success. So I just want to say before we open for discussion, Deborah, I want to reiterate everybody's thanks for your incredible service. I don't think Consuelo is here, but both of you are awesome. I don't know if you'll be glad to hear this or not, but we will be keeping in touch with you because I'm sure we're going to have to fall back on you and your wisdom as we move forward. So I want to give us plenty of time to have to answer any questions you might have. You can raise your hand, you can post in the chat. Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to go back to Deborah's question. If I can find it. Deborah, what was your question?
I was noticing right with the Wellesley record that Doug happened to show us, the language data was missing, and then I looked it up in DS and it's missing there too. So say I'm Ruth Rogers, who I hope is made it to the meeting. She was, Wellesley's internet went down, so she wasn't on at the beginning. I don't know if she's on yet or not. She sent me an email about it. But anyway, so say you're Ruth and you notice, you look at your records and like, oh, wow, we forgot to put language in. Like, is that institution going to have a way without going through Penn and bothering all of you guys? Is there going to be a way that they can edit their records for something like that?
So yes, I mean, so depending on how you're keeping your data. Are you keeping your manuscript data in a MARC record? Are you using TEI? Are you just using a spreadsheet? What you'll do is update that record, right? And then we can go back and update. We can take that data again. It may not happen immediately. It may, we'll have to have a schedule of update.
Okay.
But you can definitely go back and correct it. But what we really are trying to do is just have one source.
Yeah.
One place where data is kept, like the authoritative record, whether that's MARC, whether that's a TEI record, whether that you could actually put your data into this spreadsheet directly if you don't have another way of storing data. But that will be the one record, like whatever you as the institution decide as the sort of primary record.
Got it.
That's what we're going to take.
Okay. And then as an institution, I would like somehow notify you that I've got records ready to update, and then you would re-inject, like basically copy them over whatever's in there now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to work out how the workflow.
Yeah.
Do we do this once every year, every 6 months? I think we have to get used to how this works before we. Sorry, I don't know why I went out of focus. Before we can give you a plan, but the idea is that there will be regular updating.
Cool. Yeah, I think you want to build that in because that's going to happen.
Yeah. And what was good to find out about, as we were doing the sort of testing phase is, Doug said it took him, 30, 40 hours to write the scripts, but once that script is written, it's like getting the data is fairly instant.
Yeah.
So if there's a script for Penn MARC data, and as long as the MARC data doesn't change, as long as catalogers at Penn don't change fields, we can just reuse that script and instantly update data. So that part is working very well.
Anybody else have questions for Lynn?
Or Emma or Doug?
Or Emma or Doug, yes.
Jim has her hand raised.
Hey, thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. This might be a little premature, but kind of related to what you were talking about just now. So I was wondering, how will you transfer the data from institutional catalogs, let's say MARC? Because I think most of the institutional catalogs contain everything else too. So will you for example, be needing a list of everything that an institution wants to be included in the digital scriptorium, links to the catalog or something?
There are a couple of workflow pieces to work out. So let's say that we're being initially provided with the data. We need some way of accessing the MARC XML. And depending on the institution, how that information is provided is different. So we might need a list of URLs. And so the first time, or we might need a list of identifiers, or it may be, depending if MARC is only, XML is only available internally, then someone will need to get those records to provide to us. Where it becomes slightly more complicated is once the record's already in Digital Scriptorium, and we still have to work this bit of the workflow out. We'll need to know what Digital Scriptorium identifier the data goes with. But again, we'll develop a system for having that kind of communication.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I think like what we're going to need to do is have really good communication with each institution. And right now we have a member rep, and that rep is really going to have to, we're going to have to work with that member rep to make sure that communication is getting to, say, the catalogers, for example. And so that's, you know, when I said that we're going to be meeting with current members and future members, that's one of the things that we really want to make sure that is happening at the institutions, is that everybody who needs to know about Digital Scriptorium and how data gets into it is aware of it. Yeah. Lisa?
I'm just wondering, and sort of following up on Kivelchim's question, would it be helpful to encourage members to use a particular genre tag so that the Digital Scriptorium algorithm can easily filter a set of manuscript records consistently and repeatably, rather than having to send a list of URLs or identifiers?
You know, one of the things I wonder about is being able to, I think what you're saying is, could we essentially make queries to an online system and make those requests? That's possible. I don't have exact experience with that. That's something that could be done. I think that based on my own experience of cataloging, it's kind of fraught trying to
well, it's true.
Particularly if
people are
once you
really
get
inconsistent. Right.
There's, you know, people are remarkably consistent, but there are enough inconsistencies that it makes it tricky. I think that my own, we haven't really addressed this, but my own thought is that I would prefer that people be explicit and tell us what things we need to get or to provide it. And I think that provides clarity and cuts down on confusion and back and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms of, I think that the workflow should be really transparent. Like, this is how it goes in this one direction, and it's very clear what happens, and it isn't onerous, but there is clear communication, and it's easy to understand and follow and track.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
And one of the things that we're hoping comes out of this is a kind of normalization of manuscript description in things like, you know, in formats like MARC, especially. We're not relying upon that, but we're hoping that it, you know, like certain practices might become standard across institutions. For example, like where do you put the shelf mark in a MARC record? How do you record that? Because I think we know that some institutions don't put their shelf mark. I mean, Doug, you can clarify this if I'm getting it wrong, but the shelf mark may not be in a field that we can pull. For example, it's not structured data. And so that institution's shelf mark won't show up in the digital scriptorium record until they put it in a place where it can be mapped across. And I think that's okay. I mean, there's going to be a level of imperfection, of quote unquote imperfection in these records that maybe it's because I've been working with the Schoenberg database for these many years that we're all going to have to accept and realize that that's okay, that if it's imperfect, it's not bad.
Yeah, as I understand it, many institutions catalog in OCLC connection, and call numbers and shelf marks are local information. And so there's not a standard place where they're stored in that record. And this has to do with how books are cataloged more than it has to do with how manuscripts are cataloged. So as Lisa pointed out, there are conventions for 500 field use, the comment field use. There are other local conventions for managing catalog numbers, call numbers.
Lynn, I think that's, and Doug, I think that's a really, what could be very fortuitous for cataloging with the local institutions, because a lot of times the manuscript catalogers are trying to make an argument about how to use the MARC record for our content. And so to have the DS institution behind them saying, look, every DS wants the call number here or the shelf mark here. It's really useful because most of us, or a lot of us, are often the only cataloger in the institution that does manuscripts. So it's not like we have a lot of support compared to like the rest of the catalogers. They're all doing printed books and newer kinds of media. And so I think things like that about coming up with a practice, you could call it best practice, maybe as opposed to a standard, that would, that it's useful. It supports the catalogers that are trying to catalog manuscripts at the institutions. I think it's a great idea, great aspiration. Anybody else have any questions about DS 2.0? I'm so grateful to Lynn and Emma and Doug for what they've done and for the energy and commitment they've made to this. DS is really lucky, and I'm so optimistic about the future of DS because it's in their hands, and so I think whatever anxieties we all might be feeling going through a transition like this, I feel like they're going to be short-lived. They're going to be transitional. They're going to go away because DS is just it's just in the right place at the right time to go to where it needs to go next. And I really feel it's a great feeling for me stepping down as president to hand it over to Lynn and the people at Penn and the new board and the new IC. I really, I'm going to sleep at night. Change my phone number maybe, but.
The one thing I would also add is I'm really excited by what some of the ways you're thinking about the data and the structuring, because I can also see other databases and other projects leveraging or doing something similar. And I think that and it's also grounded in something that can last as long as the first DS did. In terms of that's really important, being able to move data, the opportunities to bring together all of what we've always set out to do is like be able to bring together all the various manuscripts across the country, and seeing the relationships is pretty amazing. And if you need, I'm willing to volunteer in any way. If you want a guinea pig, I'm signing up now. So congrats, and I can't wait to
go to test records. You're going to test records.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I can't do Yale's anymore, but I did find one manuscript at the Durham Museum today, a gradual. It has a very nice, heavy, or over-the-top binding, contemporary binding. So I'm ready to test drive on that one. So.
This is in Omaha?
Yes.
Awesome.
So
We need
anyway,
Omaha manuscripts. We don't have any Omaha manuscripts.
Lisa put me onto it. So, but they have it on display. It's actually quite
Of
nice.
course she did. Oh my gosh, Lisa, is there a manuscript you don't know about? So funny. Well, I'm just delighted. Anybody else wanted to make a comment, ask a question? If not, I'm just delighted to have you all here and to be able to send you all home with just good wishes and the wishes for the best of health, and also for the best work you can accomplish in spite of lots of obstacles we've all had in the last it's going a year and a half, I guess. It's great. I think that DS has powered through this in remarkable ways, and it's going to keep going. And yes, please know that you can contact any of us anytime with questions you might have regarding your collections or how you use DS as a user. Everybody's everybody's emails I believe are on the website, at least if the reps are the emails of the reps. And also I'm pretty sure on the front, I'm looking at the beginning of the homepage. Yep. You can, my email's embedded in my address on the website, on the front homepage. I'll be editing the website this week to put, to switch everybody out to the new people. So there should not be any obstacles for you getting in touch with anybody you want to, managing the organization. But if you do, write to me, I'll tell you how to find them. So, but anyway, thank you so much. It's so good to see all of you. I hope the next time we do this, we can do it in person. It's nothing better, I think, than going out after DS meetings. So much fun to see all of you go out for dinner and have drinks. So everybody, please take care. Thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for everything everybody's contributed to this. And my very best wishes, best of luck to Lynn and the whole new board. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Deborah.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Deborah.
You want to stop recording?
Yeah. Did it stop? No.